la Présidente.
Good morning once again, dear colleagues.
Dobré ráno, milí kolegovia. Poprosím vás, aby ste sa usadili.
So the sitting has resumed.
Takže naša schôdza znovu začína. Mám niekoľko oznámení pre vás.
Please take your seats. I have a few announcements. I was informed that there are no objections raised within the Conference of Committee Chairs to the recommendations by the Agri Committee not to oppose to two delegated acts pursuant to Rule 111, paragraph 6 of the Rules of Procedure. The recommendations are available on the plenary webpage. If no objections are raised by a political group or members reaching at least the low threshold within 24 hours following this announcement, the recommendations shall be deemed to have been approved. Otherwise, they will be put to the vote. I would also like to inform that since the adjournment of Parliament's session on the 15th of December, the President, together with the President of the Council, has signed one act adopted under the ordinary legislative procedure in accordance with Rule 79 of our Rules of Procedure. The title of the Act will be published in the minutes of this sitting. We now come to the order of business. The final draft agenda as adopted by the Conference of Presidents by written procedure on 14th January pursuant to the Rule 157 has been distributed. I also would like to put to the House the following proposal for changes to the final draft agenda with the consensus of the political groups. On Wednesday, there will be an election of Quaestors of Parliament. This second ballot today will be held from 2:30 until 3:15, and the result will be announced at 4 o'clock. And the debates on this afternoon will start at 3 o'clock instead of 2:30. Due to the impossibility for the President of the European Council to be present today, the debate on the European Council and Commission statements on the conclusion of the European Council meeting of the 16th and 17th December is cancelled, and as a consequence, therefore, debates will start with the report by Ms. Schaldemose on the Digital Services Act. A voting session will also take place tonight from 6 o'clock until 7:15, and announcements of those results will be held tomorrow at 9 o'clock. If there are no objections, I think we can proceed, and we move to the next item of the agenda, which is European Council and Commission statements, conclusion of the European Council meeting of 16th December, and also I would like to talk about the Council and Commission statements on the presentation of the programme of activities of the French presidency. Monsieur le Président de la République française.
Mr. President of the French Republic, we're delighted to see you today in the European Parliament hemicycle in Strasbourg. It's the second time this week, although of course the circumstances are very different. I would still like to ask everybody to think for a few seconds about the late President Sassoli. Since the 1st of January, France has had the rotating presidency of the European Union, a presidency where the idea of a sovereign Europe is crucially important when we face multiple challenges: health, economic, climate, migratory challenges. Mr. President, you can count on this House to come up with responses to these challenges, to stand up for our values when hostile powers are doing all they can to weaken and destroy what we are, an area of peace, freedom and prosperity. You can count on this House to be with you to make the French presidency of the Council of the European Union a success. And now, sir, let me give you the floor. Welcome once again.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, Vice Presidents, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, honourable members of the European Parliament. Madam President, let me first of all congratulate you on your election. You've said that we're all thinking about your late predecessor, David Sassoli, this morning, who, like all of us, believed in another Europe, a Europe of values which bring us together, a Europe built on a unique model based on freedom, solidarity, tradition and progress. This civilization which has matured over centuries, and for 70 years what we've been trying to build, putting an end to the constant wars on our continent, and in this House expressing in Strasbourg the idea of the will of the people. This Europe which during the pandemic held firm in terms of developing a vaccine and economic recovery. I'm delighted and I'm honoured today to be able to speak to you at the beginning of the French presidency. And I'd like to just share some ideas with you. I can't go through all of the topics. I'm sure we'll come up against them again during the question and answer period. But I want to talk about some of the deep convictions which lie behind our common views and common actions. This Europe I've been talking about, this European integration, is based on three main promises. One, a promise of democracy, which is born here in Europe and was reborn, recast on our continent, given new life in the last 70 years. A promise of progress shared by all, and a promise for peace. And Europe has kept its word as far as these promises are concerned. The Europe in which we're living in was marked by some tragic elements in history, but now, if we look at the Europe in which we live in, these three promises are under threat. And we, not just in the next few months, but the task of our whole generation is to respond, root and branch, to these, giving new life to these promises. I started with the promise of democracy. This is something which marks us out as Europeans, and the French presidency will be one which promotes the values which are ours and can be often looked at as something which we have in perpetuity, but are in fact being weakened, because we're a generation which is discovering again how the rule of law and democracy can be made fragile. Liberal democracy, using the word in its political sense, over the last few years, this thing that Europe invented, people seem to think it's getting tired and can't meet the new challenges. But I'm here to tell you how these last few months have shown the management of the pandemic by democracies, with debates in parliaments, with a free press, with research and academic systems which are open and free, has led to decisions which have been taken which protected our lives, protected the economy much better than authoritarian regimes did. What we did was, frankly, together, show that this cliché is wrong, that our democracies are weaker. That's why we're working together to protect liberal democracy, to our electoral processes, which are the subject of foreign interference, to protect the sovereignty of the people. Here we have work which will continue throughout the spring with the conference on the future of Europe. The French presidency will, along with Germany, the clear agreement was reached as far as this was concerned, that your Parliament's legislative right is now going to be important. The rule of law. We're fighting for this simple idea, part of the universal human rights, to protect us from the people who get far too carried away as far as these things are concerned. Fundamental rights, it was decided in a sovereign fashion by member states to accept this when they joined the European Union. What do they want to call into question? That people are equal, that each one has a right to have a fair trial in an independent judiciary? And the basic idea that to be more effective, we need to roll back the rule of law. Legitimate changes can be brought in by governments, but that doesn't call the rule of law into question. All of us, before we joined the European institutions, the principles of which were set in motion as a fruit of our common commitment and our common ideas. The end of the rule of law is the beginning of authoritarianism. It goes back to authoritarian regimes, and they have marked our history only too badly. There is an ideological combat behind all of this, of course, and various authoritarian powers on our borders are carrying this fight out, and it's affecting many of our countries. You can see what's happening, undermining the very basis of our history, where tolerance and humanitarianism is the very basis of our civilization. An idea is being pushed to undermine the sovereignty of our people. So we are going to work against that. We're going to talk, and we are going to defend the power of the rule of law in every instance. I said through dialogue, because it's not a question that the rule of law is some kind of invention made in Brussels, and Brussels are the only thing that can run it. No, that's not true. It's the result of our common history. There were revolutions over the last century to people could free themselves from totalitarianism. So the rule of law is precious. And it's a question of convincing people again who have drifted away from the respect of it. And we need to win over them again. I talked about how unique European democracy is. That also is going to be in part and parcel of this struggle. And I want our European values, which bring us together, which we're proud of and are our strength, we want these to flourish. We had the Charter of Fundamental Rights 20 years ago. The death penalty was outlawed throughout Europe then. So we should use this charter to be more explicit on protecting the environment and recognising the right to abortion. let's open this debate freely, talking to our fellow citizens, and give fresh impetus to our rule of law, making Europe even stronger. That's the only way our common political project can go. I mentioned this uniqueness, and it also, of course, is part of our solidarity, which is also unique. It was invented, along with the welfare state, a system of protection covering all citizens from cradle to grave. This is a heritage of our democracy in Europe. And the pandemic has shown that solidarity isn't a weakness. It's a force greater than any other, because it allowed us to save lives, protect jobs. It allowed us to get together a vaccine for us in Europe. It's the spirit of solidarity that led us as Europeans to be the most open in the world as far as exporting vaccine as a gift. And I hope that our presidency will continue that work, that it'll do all it can to make sure that everybody can have a quality job, better paid, with minimum wages which are decent and available to all, reducing wage gap between men and women, creating new rights for digital platform workers, to introduce quotas for women on company boards, fighting against all kinds of discrimination. The progress I've just mentioned isn't simply an empty promise or just words. These are legal texts which in the next few weeks will be given out to all of us, and which I hope we can make law during this 6 months. We've got the possibility of doing so. Let's do it together. And a thing that marks us out as this promise of democracy is this idea of a separate kind of culture. What is it to be European? It's to feel emotion when we see the treasures of Europe, the fruits of our history, to the beauties of Paris, to the beauties of Krakow, the romantic spirit, the works of Chopin, the poetry of Fernando Pessoa. It's having a way of being in the world, from our museums to our cafes, that is unique. This is all part of what makes us unique. We've got differences, of course, but from ancient Greece to the Roman Empire, Christianity, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, all of this has shaped human destiny, and I do hope that we can continue together to promote this European civilization. Universal cultures, respecting one another, respecting people's differences and identities. That's why we propose that our best historians and intellectuals are brought together to build together the fruits of the common history which we've lived through. So that's the first point, I think, to meet the promise of democracy, making Europe over. And we'll have to work together on the next 6 months. We want to make Europe a cultural, democratic and educational power, proud of itself, able to meet these challenges. The second promise is the promise of progress. Europe has never thought about simply maintaining the status quo and sitting back. We were built by a desire to build economic growth, a model for the future, the possibility offered to our working and middle classes to enjoy the benefits of this progress. And that promise has been weakened over the last few years. Growing inequality, deindustrialization, new challenges, in particular the climate and digital challenges, have spread out throughout the continent. And our challenge, therefore, is to build a model, a new model meeting these new challenges, which will allow us to come through on the promise of progress. And climate is the first challenge. Europe is the area where in Paris in 2015 universal climate awareness really began. It's the continent where, with its target of carbon neutrality by 2050, set itself the most ambitious climate goals on the planet. Now, we have to move from words to deeds, transforming our industries, investing in new technologies, hydrogen, batteries. That's what the pact is all about. The Commission has come out with some powerful proposals, and we now have together in the next few weeks to implement many of these proposals, calling on all the stakeholders here and throughout the world to help us with the green transition. Dealing with the carbon adjustment mechanism at borders, which we've been working on for years, and having mirror aspects in the trade agreement so that they do the same that we're doing, that's vitally important. Europe needs to adopt the first law in the world on imports from the fruit of deforestation. So we need to take measures on these issues as the first planks in our strategy. We'll be doing this at national level. We'll also be trying to make certain that the battle for biodiversity and against climate change works as well. We're having a summit on the oceans very soon, where many member states and the Commission have an important strategy to present, because we are a major maritime power, and there too, when it comes to biodiversity, have got an agenda which we want to move forward. The second 21st century challenge is the digital challenge, the digital revolution. We in Europe believe in the diffusion of knowledge. We, the people, are not going to reject that, but our challenge is a double challenge. First of all, to build a genuine single digital market so that we can create European flagships and champions. There's investing in new technology, in new sectors, as the Commission has proposed on many occasions. It's consolidating a Europe that can finance these champions and can simplify its law so that we can build a genuine single market, a domestic market which is huge in scale. And at the same time, Europe needs to work with the digital stakeholders to protect this enlightened spirit, to protect our rights, our freedoms, the respect for people's private lives, battle against hate speech and division. That's why, along with you, honourable members of the European Parliament, we're going to be putting forward important texts which need to be completed, texts on digital services, which you'll be ruling on tomorrow, and in the next few months we could see the emergence of a European digital model which simultaneously will provide for free and fair competition between stakeholders and stop platforms killing innovation and making sure they protect citizens. The second thing the things we need to do will have to allow us to provide economic protection for digital stakeholders, because sometimes these champions don't behave as champions should. But also there needs to be a democratic debate against hate speech, manipulation, when people don't ever seem to take responsibility for their actions. We need to bring in new regulations to deal with that. The third challenge is, of course, security. The promise of progress in the future only means that we can meet cyber attacks, terrorist attacks, illegal migration. As we live in turbulent times, we need to provide a response to these. And Europe, therefore, needs to equip itself, not because of a lack of trust as far as other powers are concerned, no, but to make sure that it remains independent in a violent world, so that we aren't the whim of others to be free, in other words. Therefore, we need to make certain we have control over our own borders and our own area. We've made a great deal of progress as we've beefed up Frontex, and the French presidency will try to reform the Schengen area, which is at the base of its original promise of an area of free movement. Protecting our external borders, including having an intergovernmental rapid intervention force, backed by an agreement between member states, as we did between 2018 and 2021, building partnerships with countries of origin and countries of transit to stop the traffickers, and making a more effective policy which respects our principles to battle against irregular immigration. When it comes to defence, we can't just be content with responding to international crises. We need to be able to anticipate things and organise the safety of Europe to meet the challenges. We can see many of them were unprecedented over the last few years. And during our 6 months, I hope we've seen a lot of progress, in the previous presidency, under the German presidency, defining our doctrine of our own security, fitting with the times, and also having a proper European defence industry and seeking strategic independence, without which the Europe of defence is meaningless and won't even exist. You'll have understood that through this agenda we want together to build a Europe which will be a power in the future, a Europe that can respond to climate, technological and digital challenges, also geopolitical challenges, a Europe which is independent and it has the power to decide its own future for itself and not to depend on the choices of the other major powers. Finally, I mentioned the promise of peace. Our Europe today is confronted with escalating tension on our borders, a world which is winding into deregulation and the possible reappearance of the most tragic thing of all, war. Our model, which goes beyond our borders and is why our founding fathers always looked outwards beyond Europe, is to think about some of our neighbourhood policies again and think about our role in the world to try to help build a real power for balance. That's what Europe can do. Europe can therefore propose a new alliance to the African continent, linking the two sides of the Mediterranean. We can't just look at the subject of migration without looking at the deep-rooted causes and see that we have a common destiny with the African continent. It's part of this turbulent world and a part of the future of that continent, but also part of our own future as well. With Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel, we've wanted to hold a summit, and we plan to in February, to recast our partnership with the African continent. We want our African friends to allow us to help them. We've already, by June, we'll have distributed 700 million doses of vaccine, and we want to have a new stage, come up with a new kind of alliance with the African continent, first of all through an economic and financial new deal for Africa, which is based on what we built in May in Europe. Europe put forward and brought out the special drawing rights at the IMF and coming up with specific investment proposals as well. Secondly, an agenda as far as education, health and climate is concerned to help the African continent develop and provide new hope for young people in Africa. And thirdly, a security agenda. European support to be given to African states who are seeing an increase in terrorism, as we did together in the Sahel. Finally, fighting against illegal immigration and trafficking networks as we do, we want to make certain that economic, cultural and academic cooperation continues to flourish. Europe can't turn its back on the Western Balkans either. The Western Balkans are geographically and historically, for the tragic past and a greater future, at the heart of the European continent. They have wounds which show us how fragile peace can be and how strong our union can be. That's why today we want there too to think about our relations with the Western Balkan countries and give them a clear perspective of accession to the European Union, not against anybody to try to destabilise anybody else. It's a positive accession which will be carried out in a reasonable time frame. We are modernising the procedure of negotiation over the last few months. And it's not the present Europe with its rules which can become Europe of 31, 32, 33 member states. We'd be kidding ourselves if we thought that. So, in the framework of the conference and the results expected in May, we need to think about our own rules again and make them clearer, make them easier so that we can decide more quickly and more easily, and also politically be honest about Europe, a Europe where the Western Balkan countries have a place. We need to look again at the way Europe works and the shape of Europe. That's why the conference on the future of Europe should be followed up on a conference by a conference on the Western Balkans dealing with these crucial topics. Europe and the United Kingdom also need to regain trust in one another. I don't want to speak at excessive length, Madam President, but I'll just say that the links of friendship between ourselves and the people of the United Kingdom are there and will remain. Freedom, economic and social progress, what we've done together is too much to just be forgotten. But to continue to move together and work together after Brexit, that means that the UK government needs to commit to itself in good faith, respecting the agreements already concluded with the Union, which we will stick to, and we want to make certain that the agreements entered into are respected. When it comes to the rights of our fishermen or the Northern Ireland Protocol or vital discussions which have to be had in the future. Let's be clear, let's be tough, than say that agreement entered into have to be respected. That's the way to remain friends. Europe wants to be an area of collective security on our continent. The security of our continent requires strategic rethinking for Europe, strategic rearming of Europe as an area of balance and peace when it comes to dialogue with Russia in particular. This dialogue is something I've been standing up for many years. It's not just a vague idea because we're so close together. Sometimes for us and for Russia, for the very security of our continent, which is indivisible, we need this dialogue. We need in Europe collectively to set out our own requirements and make certain that they are respected, and we need to be in a position to make that happen. We need to be decisive when it comes to destabilisation, manipulation and interference. What we need to build is a European order based on principles and rules which we can rally behind and which we put together not against anybody, not without anybody, but with Russia 30 years ago. Let me remind you of that. Rejecting the recourse to force, coercion, threats, free choices of states to accede to alliances or bodies that they wish to do so, inviolability of borders, territorial integrity of states, rejection of spheres of influence. What I'm talking about are the principles which we, Europeans and Russia, signed up to 30 years ago. We in Europe need to stand up for these inherent rights which are part of the sovereignty of states. It's up to us to reaffirm these values and effectively violate those who violate them. This is at the heart of our European project, security, and it's a response to the destabilisation which some people are trying to undertake on our continent. That's why we'll continue with Germany in the Normandy formula to look for a response to the conflict a solution to the conflict in the Ukraine, which is crucially important at the moment. And your collective support, ladies and gentlemen, is vital to achieve that. That's why we will make sure that Europe makes its voice heard, its single voice heard when it comes to strategic armaments, conventional weapons, the transparency of military activities, and respect for the sovereignty of all European states, no matter what their history may be. Over the next few months, we should come up with a European proposal building a new order of security and stability. We should build this as Europeans, working with other Europeans, working with our allies in NATO, and then propose it for negotiation with Russia. Honourable members of the European Parliament, I was born in 19 77, and I saw Europe all around me as I was growing up. I grew up in northern France, and Europe meant peace. It was just obvious. You didn't have to think about it. Like a lot of you here, I saw a lot of Euroscepticism, the 2005 referendum, the idea that Europe was just a technocracy, delocalization, sovereign debt crisis. Our generations today need to recast our Europe so that it meets its promise of being a democracy, providing progress and providing peace. We need to give ourselves the means to make Europe a cultural, democratic and educational power, a power for the future, a power for balance. In order to do that, we have a number of crucial texts to approve over the next weeks and months, and I count on the close cooperation with the European Parliament, bearing in mind these texts and these shared ambitions. All together, faced with the tyranny of feeble ideas, we need to come up with what unity really means, the desire to take the long view and be bold when we need to. Robert Schuman talks about creative efforts, not banning things, not making things too easy. These creative efforts built Europe. Neither the policies from before the crisis or what we used to do then or the reflexes of the past going back to nationalism, dissolving our identities, none of those things will fit the coming world. Our capacity, though, to innovate, to invent, to make a dream possible, to make it real and make it useful to our fellow citizens, that's at the heart of our success. We have the strength, we have the means. That's why I believe in us. Thanks very much.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I give the floor now on behalf of the Commission to Vice President Šefčovič. You have the floor.
Madame la Présidente, Monsieur le Président de la République.
President of the Parliament, President of France, members of the European Parliament, it is a pleasure to speak at the start of this debate. And I'd like to congratulate you, my dear Roberta, on your election as President. Now, I know that President von der Leyen regrets not being able to be present here today in person. And that reminds us once again that the COVID-19 pandemic is still very present in our lives. I'm nevertheless certain that she shares my feelings today. I'm pleased that Europe can count on the experience and wisdom of France. During the coming months, we will be living through a crucial time in our history. The French presidency begins in an agitated geopolitical context.
And indeed, you only need to look at our immediate neighbourhood. There is just a short plane ride away, a couple of hours, where security architecture of our continent is being challenged. We see old, failed ideas re-emerging of power block competition, of spheres of influence. And we Europeans are resolutely opposed to entire countries being once again treated so disdainfully as mere backyards. We categorically reject the threat of use of force, one of the fundamental principles that underpin European security as enshrined in the Helsinki Final Act. And we stand ready to take action if necessary. And we have made clear any further military aggression against Ukraine will have massive consequences and severe costs. At the same time, we welcome the recent diplomatic activity from US-Russia talks to the NATO-Russia Council and the OEC meeting, and the Commission remains in close contact with the US administration. We Europeans will do everything in our power to protect and nurture our model of peaceful democratic governance and its central tenets of dialogue and diplomacy. We will strengthen it from within and protect it against outside threats, from cyber attacks to hybrid threats, such as we have seen recently on the border with Belarus. For this, two projects will be particularly important in the coming months. With the strategic compass, our new European white paper on defence, we will set out our common strategic vision, while the defence package we aim to strengthen our capabilities. And I know how my colleague, High Representative and Vice President Josep Borrell is working closely with the Minister Le Drian and all the Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Defence in that respect. Mr. President Macron just made very important remarks on the importance of EU-Africa summit. Also, we in the Commission are looking at this occasion as the possibility of the new beginning, la nouvelle ouverture, new start in this very important strategic relationship. We very much appreciate your remarks on the Western Balkans, because they, rightfully so, should be on the top of our priority lists. And we've been, of course, listening very carefully about your wise words on our relationship with the United Kingdom. United Kingdom, they are our neighbours, our allies, and I think all of us in this House would like to see them again as our strategic partners. For that to happen, we need to rebuild the trust, and trust is being built through respecting the agreements which have been recently signed and ratified, be it on withdrawal, be it on trade and cooperation, or be it proper implementation of the protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland. And we, on the side of the European Union, on the side of the Commission, will show all the flexibility, all the goodwill to make this happen, but we need a good partner on the other side. Mr. President, you've been highlighting how important our unity and cooperation in the world is. And I'm very glad that the French presidency is going to focus on all the important priorities, because the world around us is indeed becoming more unpredictable, and Europeans rightly expect us to protect them. Honourable members, ladies and gentlemen, the need to focus on threats of today and the challenges of tomorrow is, of course, also true for the European economy. Despite the pandemic, we have already embarked on the modernisation of the economy and the society towards a more sustainable way of living and working, a way of living that preserves both the health of the planet and the livelihoods of our people. That is our economic growth model for the next 10 years and beyond. We have already built a solid foundation for this through Next Generation EU. With this €800 billion recovery programme, we are not only investing to finally put the pandemic behind us, we are also investing in our sustainable and digital future. We are tackling the structural challenges of our economies while ensuring that everyone can benefit from this future. Large companies as well as our small and medium-sized enterprises, farmers as well as low-income households. And the early success of our approach is already proving us right. Studies show that thanks to the Next Generation EU, growth in Europe is 1.5% higher than it would have been with national recovery programmes alone. Dans le même temps, notre nouveau modèle de croissance doit...
Our new growth model needs to guarantee economic, political and technological sovereignty for Europe. It needs to enable our businesses and our single market to fully benefit from new opportunities. And that's why we want to bring technology back to Europe, ensuring that the smallest semiconductors in the world are manufactured here in Europe. And that's exactly what we're going to do with the European Chips Act that we will be presenting during the coming weeks. They're important for the computers of the world and in all kinds of technology. Without chips, there is no digital world. And I know my colleague, Executive Vice President Vestager, Commissioner Breton, who are also here with us today, will agree with what I say on that. I'm delighted that France is ensuring the supply chain strategies and independence are a key point of its presidency. We need to move into new areas and forge our own destiny by ensuring we have a long-term view. We also have legislation on digital markets and digital services, the Digital Market Act and the Digital Services Act. They are the pillar of our European digital strategy. We're going to limit the powers of internet giants so that we can ensure that competition remains fair, particularly for small and medium enterprises, because they are those that drive innovation here in Europe. They're the ones that pay taxes and the ones that take on board social responsibilities. Ladies and gentlemen, there was no doubt in Simone Veil's mind that a union of democracy is the most powerful and most resilient form of governance possible. During the coming months of the French presidency, we will be working extremely hard to bring our Europe closer to the Europe that she dreamed of.
And deliver sustainable growth. United, we will defend our values and strengthen our security. And united, we will work for the benefit of all Europeans, each and every day. And this is exactly what such a great Europeans like David Sassoli would like us to do. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Thank you very much, Vice President Šefčovič. We now move to the speakers of the political groups. We start with Manfred Weber for the group of the EPP.
Madam President, sounds good. Mr. President, welcome and thank you for your speech. France is ready. And after your speech, I am sure that Europe will be in good hands in the next 6 months. The priorities are well set, and if I may say, from an EPP point of view, I hear defence, I see industry policy, I see jobs. Your presidency will even organise a conference on the fight against cancer, what I saw. So many EPP priorities are in, and that's why you can count on the biggest political family in the European Union to deliver on these issues. We need progress in Europe. I want to focus in my contribution today on more general considerations. My first consideration is no more words, we need actions now in Europe. We listened to your Sorbonne speech in Athens, you had a great speech in 2018 here in this House, also today. We hear a lot about a vision for Europe, about sovereignty, about a stronger Europe, and I deeply believe in what you say in this perspective for Europe, but in the last 5 years, is Europe really more sovereign than before? Every 6 months we welcome here in this chamber a new presidency. Angela Merkel was here, Prime Minister Janša, Prime Minister Costa. For a Prime Minister it's probably interesting to be here and to present ideas on European stage. For us it is a kind of a routine, and sometimes I even must say a kind of a boring routine, because we hear on the big things on the agenda every 6 months the same. And that's why the question is, can we speed up? And I give you a few considerations, a few examples on this. Since years we know about Putin's behavior. He threatens us. He wants to go to war against Ukraine. He wants to build up an empire of oligarchs against our idea of freedom. And the European Council, let's be frank, is not capable today to put a firm stand in today's world on the table. Nord Stream 2, that's my opinion, must be stopped if there is a military escalation in the Ukraine. But what is going on Council side? And after Afghanistan and Ukraine, I think it's obvious that we need now someone in the Council who goes to the Council and tells them we have to stop unanimous vote on foreign affairs issues. Who will do so? Who will do so? Take rule of law as another example. Article 7 procedure. I voted personally here in this House in favour of an Article 7 against Hungary. And my party today is in Slovakia, in Czech Republic, in Poland with Donald Tusk, the front runners for rule of law and for a pro-European approach. That is EPP today. But on the other hand, I see in Council that Article 7 procedure is not even on the table of the Council. You do press statements among leaders, but when Viktor Orban and we are sitting together, you are not ready to talk about this. And let's be also clear on the question of voting. You are even obliged to vote now on the Article 7 procedure on Council, but nothing is happening. We fought as Parliament for a binding rule of law mechanism, and Commission will do what we asked them to do, but the Council is not capable to deliver. There are two examples for what I say what I mean when I say we need now actions, not any more words. That is what Europe needs. And if you let me add another point, the second consideration, I think we have to consider that in the Western democracies we see more and more splits. And a real big question for us is how can we keep our societies together? Cities against rural areas, young generation against an aging continent, vaccinated people against unvaccinated people. I try also to explain this on an example. Yellow Vest is not only a French phenomenon. Yes, we are committed to the fight against climate change, but when we discuss the issues on Green Deal now in the next years, we have to take care about the poor. Energy poverty is unacceptable for us in Europe. A higher energy costs will also bring high inflation, and that will also be a problem for the poor in our societies. And that's why we have to put this subject in the center of the debate about Green Deal. Otherwise, populism will grow and the transition will fail. And that's why EPP will take care about this. And allow me to add a final point, a more general consideration again on this splitting up about the political concept. You know that I'm a Christian Democrat. My party, as EPP, we are bridge builders by definition. In some of your contributions in the past, I understood that you are more separating between the progressive and the populists to create this split in a society. I don't think that this is healthy on the long run. I don't think so. I think it is good to have a competition in the center of the landscape between different political ideas among Democrats and not creating the split towards the populists. Probably with this approach we make the populists even bigger than they are. And that's why I'm happy, let me say this as an EPP politician, that now with Valérie Pécresse we have a real competition in the center of the landscape. I'm happy about this, and maybe, let's see about the French voters, the French voters will make also gender balance a reality, that they vote the first time for a French female pro-European candidate. So that is allowed as a party politician, if I may say it this way, Mr. President. But what I really like, and what I really like is and Mr. President, please really, seriously speaking, what I really like is your ambitious approach for Europe, and especially is the support for this chamber. 210 million people voted 2019 for this parliament. The second biggest democracy in the world is Europe. And to strengthen this institution and to show that the decisions of the future are made in this institution is what we all believe in. We count on you to transform the outcome of the conference for the future of Europe in reality. Mr. President, welcome. Time is running. Let's keep Europe united, and no more words. Let's practice actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Weber. I now give the floor to Irache Garcia Perez on behalf of the S&D Group.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, President. President Macron, welcome to the European Parliament. your rotating presidency of the Council is taking place at a time when the pandemic has enabled Europe to take historic steps forward in the integration project. In your New Year's speech, you promised a change of direction in 2022 to achieve a Europe that is powerful in the world, fully sovereign, free in its choices, and in charge of its own destiny. Europe will only be powerful in the world if it's able to eradicate poverty and inequalities. European democracy needs the construction of a social Europe that curbs the most damaging instincts of ultra-right-wing populism. We need to conclude the reforms that are on the table, such as establishing minimum wages across the European Union, regulating the working conditions of platform workers, setting out a minimum wage, or the implementation of the social fund for the climate. Our power in the world will also depend on whether we're capable of living in equality, unblock the Anti-Discrimination Directive, support the Gender Violence Directive, and push for the necessary agreements to do away with the salary gap and break the glass ceiling that prevents women from being present on company boards. Europe will have no future if it leaves aside the millions of women that make up half of our population. There will be no present or future if we don't defend the only tool able to protect the values that unite us, the rule of law. We need to apply the conditionality mechanism and maintain a commitment not to approve the Polish and Hungarian recovery plans until their governments return to the path of democracy and comply with Court of Justice rulings. A powerful Europe will be the Europe that takes the lead on an energy transition that's fairer and more sustainable and avoids disastrous climate change. We're aware of the specific circumstances of France and Germany, but the Commission's proposal on nuclear and gas cannot weaken our global leadership on renewable energies, the only green energy sources. France needs to show powerful leadership and take advantage of the European response model that was established during the pandemic. Together, we set up the most ambitious recovery plan in the history of Europe, worth over 750 billion euros, backed up by pooled debt. Now we need to prevent premature adjustments that would kill off our economic growth. Austerity made the richest richer and left the poorest worse off. We need a reform of the fiscal rules that fosters fair growth and supports the public investment necessary to support the priorities that we're establishing in Europe, such as the green and digital transitions. The time has come to step up our plans for a defence Europe. The withdrawal from Afghanistan, the AUKUS Pact, and the crises with Russia and Belarus should mean that we accept the development of strategic sovereignty. But Europe cannot grow within a fortress. We need solidarity with the world, and the Parliament continues to hope that the Council will agree the only possible tool to avoid the deaths of human beings on our borders, a migration pact which is based on solidarity. Mr. Macron, your presidency won't go down in history because of your talents as a speaker, but as a result of the laws that together we can bring forward. We need to move forward rapidly. The motto of your presidency concludes with the idea of a sense of belonging, and belonging requires public conviction. Put young people and those who are most vulnerable at the heart of your presidency, and they will never again ask you to take the European flag down from the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Let me hold my hand out to you, because the Socialist and Democrat family wants every citizen to feel a sense of pride when they see the European blue light up monuments in the towns and cities of our Union. As Jean Monnet taught us, we're not forming a coalition of states, We're uniting people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Garcia Perez. I now give the floor to Stéphane Séjourné on behalf of the Renew Group.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President. Congratulations once again on your election. Mr. President of the Republic, Commissioner, let me say by way of introduction that we need, as Manfred Weber said, more deeds and fewer words. I think we all agree with that, but over the last 2 years in Europe, thanks to Europe, things have moved forward. Thanks to Europe, we're the most vaccinated continent in the world. Thanks to Europe, Mr. President, we've set up a European recovery plan in historic dimensions which saved millions of Europeans from unemployment or precarious work. Thanks to Europe, we are the green continent. We'll be carbon neutral by 2050, and this will help the world and help people find work. This is partly owing to the initiative and the commitment of this Parliament, also the determination and ambitions of the institutions, Mr. President, and also to what you've done. Obviously, everything isn't perfect. They haven't gone as quickly as or as well as we might have liked. But there will still be controversy, and Europe will, as we are aware, be the convenient scapegoat for those who refuse to accept their responsibility. The work isn't over, of course, and with the presidency of the Council, which you have just opened, we need to move more quickly. I think the whole Parliament would agree with that, because the situation is urgent. It's urgent that we take control of our own destiny again and bring in European sovereignty against the foreign powers who are trying to undermine it. It's urgent for the planet. It's urgent to get the rule of law respected. It's an urgent matter for our young people who are looking to us for new energy and a new direction. Mr. President of the Republic, you have set a course, and my group will be there. We'll be beside you to try to get our rules and values accepted by the giants of the digital industry, thanks to the Digital Markets and Digital Services Act. We'll be with you trying to go yet further for the planet with the carbon border tax. We want a more powerful European defence. We want fairer trade. We want reimagined minimum wages and new budgetary rules, borders that are better respected, and a recast right of asylum. Mr. President, my group would like to add 2 ideas to what you've put forward for Europeans. First of all, when it comes to equality between women and men, we want the French presidency to be behind the idea of the Simone Veil Pact, which will call on all signatory countries to adopt progressive laws when it comes to parity, sexual and reproductive rights, and the battle against sexual and sexist violence. But also, we want you to be bold with us in helping the Europe of young people. We've been calling on our young people to do a great deal over the last few months. We need to be worthy of them. We want to see, therefore, a platform created to help young Europeans set up a business, to get involved, to find a job or a training course. It won't be easy. We're aware of that. There are still differences in this House and within political groups themselves. But we in Renew Europe are committed to consensus. That's the lies at the heart of this union, we believe. And the German, Dutch, and the political party that my group belongs to are willing to go further. The majority of this Parliament has voted through an agenda for 2024, which is very ambitious. We are willing and ready, because I think the stars are lining up with the French presidency. The commitment is there. The course is clear. Let's let the liars and the cynics bray. They want to cling to things as they are. My group wants to fight to build the future and bring in a proper united Europe more quickly. So, law by law, bill by bill, project by project, reform by reform, we are fighting for a green, free, proud and fully sovereign Europe. The French presidency is coming at a key moment. Everything is in place for it to be a success, and I would recommend just one watchword: be bold, be bold, be bold.
Merci. Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Séjourné. Now for the Green Group, I will give the floor to Yannick Jadot.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Mr. President of the French Republic, that was undeniably an excellent